I want to bring in the executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice. He's an attorney, a radio talk show host, Jordan Sekulow. Do we have Jordan? Believe we do. There he is. Jordan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, a lot, of course, still happening on the healthcare front. I want to get a lot of your thoughts on that, but I want to get right to this, the latest today. Anthony Scaramucci removed as White House Communications Director just 10 days in and on General John Kelly's first day as Chief of Staff. What does this mean for the Trump administration from this day forward?
Yeah, I think, Patrick, and hearing a bit of crosstalk, but I think, Patrick, you know, when it comes to Anthony's situation specifically, I think he came in with flying colors. The first press conference he did, announcing his position with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, did some things the press really wanted, like reopening the press conference with cameras to live cameras. I think that was very important. And then second, I think what happened, though, was that maybe things got a little too heated too quick. You bring in a new chief of staff, and the new chief of staff wants the opportunity to kind of set up, especially the positions that were really vacant or becoming vacant, like Sean Spicer, who we got confirmation is still heading out as well, you know, with Reince Priebus and this shakeup happening. I just think it was a kind of chaotic couple of weeks. I know Anthony well. I wish him well. I'm sure the president didn't want to have to make this decision, but I think there was probably the New Yorker article itself. I don't think it was anything but that.
And Jordan, do you know if he will retain a spot in this administration?
You know, it was pretty clear from Sarah Huckabee Sanders today in the press conference that she said she doesn't expect Anthony to be at the White House or in the administration. Now, there were reports that he may go back to the XIM Bank where he was previously serving the administration and acting role there. That remains, again, to kind of unknown at this point. Maybe time settles. You know, we're still very early into this presidency. Anthony is a strong supporter of the president. I think people saw his strong suit and potentially, you know, could make a comeback into the administration, but I don't have any specific info. I know he was there this morning when the new chief of staff was sworn in, and then resigned. You know, the way it was put out was that he resigned to give the General Kelly, the new chief of staff, kind of a clean slate and way to operate.
All right. And if this would not have happened today, of course, we would, I think, immediately be talking about health care because there is a lot to be said still. The president recently tweeted that the GOP would be total quitters if a repeal and replace of Obamacare doesn't get done here. So from your opinion, what will it be? Are we going to let Obamacare fail, or is this something now that needs to be back on the table?
I think it has to be back on the table. You know, I was speaking to people today. We have a large radio audience, and there were a lot of topics we could have gotten to today, but we mentioned the president's tweets and remarks about kind of restarting health care and not moving forward on other legislation until the repeal of Obamacare is done, and making good on that promise, and some of the other remarks he made. And I will tell you, that is all we spent. Then people calling in, that's all they wanted to talk about. And I think that's because with all the foreign policy issues, with the new chief of staff and the shakeup of the White House, Patrick, when it all is said and done, the issue that affects the American people the most of all of these is their health care and making sure that they have a reliable health care system. We know the problems that people are facing with Obamacare right now, and we're kind of at a crossroads. I think what the president realizes, too, is that either Congress will feel the pain, if you will, from their own constituents if they do not repeal with some kind of replacement from the problems that Obamacare is facing, which puts you in a dangerous spot of then potentially bailing out Obamacare, or second, getting back to work. And I think some of the pressure points he's talking about, like the pressure points, the way Obamacare allowed these congressional staff not to be fully exempt, but to use government subsidies to buy on the exchanges. That's not what individuals get. They don't get subsidies for that. Those kind of changes and moves could again put serious pressure on Congress to finally act. And I think that is what I take away from it, is that the president is not done on this. He brought in a HHS secretary today as well as a senator to kind of continue these discussions. And I don't think he's going to let Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell run away from it.
Well, let me ask you this, though. As far as putting this back on the table, senators like Susan Collins, she says that multiple bills would be needed to repeal and replace Obamacare. But does she personify why some might say move on from health care? Because there are some that basically don't seem ready to give. And by the way, John McCain, not as available as he would be if not for his diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the issue, though, is this, is that if you move away and you don't do anything, the system's falling apart. This idea, I mean, I understand the idea of, okay, let it fall apart, but politically, can you get through the midterm elections with that kind of strategy where people are literally don't have health care options? I don't know if that is a viable option. So you're going to be put in a bind. And I think Susan Collins is one of the people on the, in the Republican big tent, but she is one that would want to bail out Obamacare and give more money and more federal subsidies and more control to the government. And I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think that she's never going to be on board, like you said. It's really, though, focusing in on, again, if you couldn't get McCain and a few of those others on the repeal with the 2-year extension to figure out how to replace it appropriately, which is what they all voted yes for, including John McCain a couple of years ago. And they put it on President Obama's desk knowing that he would veto it. But, of course, when they knew a president would sign it into law, they all got scared away. And, again, though, what are the ramifications? The ramifications are healthcare is not going to get any better for their constituents if they don't do something about it. And you could do this in multiple phases. The House plan was kind of set up that way. It would be using reconciliation. You go through step 1. Doesn't get you everything you want. Then you do the regulatory reform through HHS. And then you come back to Congress. You've dismantled Obamacare and you work on bipartisan solutions. But you got to get past the step 1. That is the biggest hurdle right now, Patrick, is that first step to starting to dismantle Obamacare is the only way you get to steps 2 and 3.
All right, and you mentioned this just a second ago, this subsidy that's available for lawmakers there in the Beltway. Is this working? The president tweeted that lawmakers are sponging off of the healthcare system and wanting to move on. Is this strategy? A lot of people give him flack for tweeting these about policy, but is this something that you feel could work? I mean, he seems to be putting a lot of heat via Twitter or not on these lawmakers.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 subsidies. There's one subsidy for the insurance companies, so that the federal government uses basically as a yearly bailout that was put in place in Obamacare later because of the cost sharing reduction, and really that's one of them. The second is the one you mentioned that just affect congressmen and their staff. So they wanted Obamacare to look like it applied to them, except for they get to use government subsidies that would be available to other government employees to purchase on a special exchange set up in Washington, D.C., where about on average 3/4 of their cost for buying a plan is covered. For the normal American who have to use the exchange, they're not getting subsidies because they fall inside that gap. And again, that is something that could be changed by policy. So yes, those kind of pressure points could get Congress to say, you know what, we can't stop working on this. I do think, Patrick, there is some thought that these members of Congress, they've had such a tough time, not necessarily on repeal until more recently, but on the replacement portion because they had it pretty good and their staffs had it pretty good. And they realized that they were not just writing a health care law that would affect all of us. They were writing a health care law that would also directly impact them, that they were no longer going to get away with exempting themselves out or getting special subsidies to buy their plans. And that could have put some, again, instead of holding their feet to the fire, it's kind of the opposite, chilled their feet. And so we've got to get back. I think that what I learned today, just from talking to grassroots Americans, is that they do not want to move on. They are not ready to move on from this topic.
Well, perfect segue to my last little bit, because I know we're running short on time. You're there in Brentwood, Tennessee. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, Jordan. Well, I would imagine you talk to these people not only on your radio program, but out in the streets, at the cafes, downtown. And you mentioned healthcare. Are they talking about Russian investigations? Are they talking about anything else with regards to what the mainstream media likes to focus on? Is it healthcare? Is that what they care the most about? What else?
Healthcare is top issue. I mean, one, because the failure think it's so upsetting. I mean, here in Tennessee, I'm new to the state, but here in Tennessee, one of the senators here who was not really on the radar voted against the repeal with 2-year transition, Lamar Alexander, who wasn't even on anyone's radar as someone to watch for in that vote, and he ended up voting no on that. So that's what they're focused on. You know, on the Russia side, we've obviously got a connection. Our chief counsel is also serving as the outside counsel to the president on that matter. And yes, there are times when people want to talk about it, usually just to get the truth or get the facts and understand what's actually going on. But day to day, it's issues like healthcare. It's the economy. It's healthcare, and they want to know what's going to happen to their healthcare, their children's healthcare, and their employees as well. I mean, a lot of small business owners here.